Okay, hi everybody. I'm Lena, and I would love to introduce Cheda Mikic, and I'll just give you guys a brief intro of who Cheda is. Cheda was actually my teacher when I did my TRE training, and he's a naturopath, craniosacral therapist, TRE trainer with over 30 years of experience in complementary medicine. Cheda began practicing TRE 15 years ago and fell in love with its transformative power, which changed his life both personally and professionally. He's the Director of Education for the TRE UK Association and leads the TRE Centre in the UK and internationally, as well as the TRE School in Rome. Cheda weaves these threads of anatomy, psychology, brain science, and ancient wisdom together on his farm in southern Italy and is grounded in nature and family. He travels regularly to London, Serbia, and across Europe to teach, learn, and connect, as well as on Zoom. And that's where we met. So welcome, and thank you so much for having this chat with me. When I was doing my training, we would quite often go on little tangents about psychedelics and TRE and didn't really have the space to fully explore it. So I thought it would be great just to have an official conversation. So yeah, thank you so much. And I would just love to start off by asking you about your journey, your personal journey, professional journey, whatever you want to start with when it comes to TRE and psychedelics, this big topic that we're going to be unpacking today.
Hi, Lena. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. And this subject, it's really important and close to my heart. And I'm glad you are doing so amazing stuff with it and taking it really professionally and seriously, which I think it's really well needed in this space. So growing up, I was an athlete, and I really frowned upon any psychedelic or any other out of body, out of control experiences, and I really uh, thought about these hippies out there. That's some really weird, crazy thing that these people do, and clearly there was part of my conditioning and greater conviction. But then, when you mature, you certain things happen, life happens, and you open yourself to learning, and then you experience spontaneously, involuntarily, different states of consciousness, and that's without psychedelics even.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the broad daylight, there were moments. Or moments under extreme stress in a war zone, in a really extreme traumatic experiences where reality changes for you in shifts, and in life-threatening situations that I was in, certain experiences really brought me to the space where I needed to open stretch my perception of reality. Um, First, I mean, there were other things to, as I just remembered now, I had actually probably first incredibly powerful experience. I was in London with my ex-wife, and we went to this, in Chinatown. There was a market there, still is, and we got some vegetables there, and we made this soup. I remember, and then we lied after the lunch. And we both went into a particular space, and I swear to God, there must have been something in that, because I had one of the greatest trips. I still remember clearly.
Wow. Any mushrooms? Were there any mushrooms in that soup?
Actually, this was interesting thing, and I went back there to find out what the hell was that. What? And I could not even find the same person, and there were veggies, but the trip was so powerful, and it lasted quite a short time, maybe 15, 20 minutes. I remember coming out of this nest, and I was an eagle, and I, just soared over the plains of North America, Canada, somewhere, which I never had this vision at all, and it was so powerful. Anyhow, conscious spiritual experience I had. It was 2002, I believe it was. And we it was I studied different spiritual traditions, and we had done a huge amount of meditation, different yogas, different Taoism. I went deep into kind of exploration of my inner world. And within that, with my ex-teacher, one of my ex-teachers, we had this structured, organized event. And once upon a time, I don't know if you know that, in Camden Markets, in Camden Lock, there used to be stands where they used to sell.
Yeah, I know. Back in the days.
Back in the days, and oh my God, then we got this blue Hawaiian mushroom. That's until now, it's my favorite, really, because the depth of that experience was like staggeringly phenomenal, really. And so I had this, being guided and connected with this being, and just took me to an extraordinary ride, really unforgettable ride from, I mean, like the structure of reality changed, and there was quite profound. The first part was so profound, but also unveiled particular illusions that I lived in, particular illusions about certain spiritual teachers that I was incredibly attached with, and opened this really dark side of that, about different music. And often we follow that with the music, some of these journeys, and for the first time I could see the waves of music actually in the field, how music travels. And you could see some of the demonic music. There was no other word I could use. I remember there was really scary and demonic, that I had no perception that exists in reality. This evil and good, this religious nonsense, all of that bullshit. Yeah, I never really bought into that until that moment, really, when you start opening deeper spaces and fields within reality. And that it became then second part of that, because it was a long trip, and we took like a hero dose, I think, without knowing, or without being properly guided by a person who was organizing that. And then they turned into very difficult, dysregulated space, and I ended up in a quite dark place, and and managed somehow. And unfortunately, within that, I was, with my current wife at the moment, and she had such a bad trip, and I felt responsible. So I was in those two zones, holding her responsible, because I took her there, and then going through these like extraordinary textures, fabrics of life that was shifting in front of me, which was fascinating, but at the same time, mind blowing virtually. And anyway, somehow survived that. Then I didn't venture into.
Can I ask what was your setting for this journey? Were you in a group setting? Was somebody leading it? What was it like?
It was a group setting, but it was free flowing as well.
The
music was organized, but I think dosages were not regulated properly, and there was no real preparation. And pre and post care, as I always talk about to ayahuasca teachers that I spoke with, and please, you have to have a pre and post where you can't, and not just about your a dietary or your food you eat, but it has to be a psychological profiling. Has to be, you need to understand who you're working with. Filling the room of 30 people in there, and then people, go through different places. How do you hold that?
Well, you raise a massive point. And, as someone who works with trauma, you mentioned dysregulated space when you were talking about your journey. And this is, I'm a trauma-informed, nervous system-based psychedelic practitioner, which is actually the exception. And as you said, there's these ayahuasca ceremonies, there's these big indigenous-led ceremonies, there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to think about who your participant is. You need to think about who's coming into the space, what are the foundations of their psyche, what's manageable for them, what makes sense to them. There's so much involved in it. So when you mentioned dysregulation, what was that like for you, having that? And did you have any concept of dysregulation at the time? Did you have kind of the nervous system language that you have now?
Not really, not really. So, it took me days to recover from that. And I was in two minds. That was the first experience which dearly brought me to something I knew deeply within me, that space. Gosh, I miss that space.
Mm.
That non-local quantum space that's, I'm one with the universe and I know the secrets of the universe. I'm part of that, It was like quite extraordinary. And even subsequent journeys were always bringing me to different places, but bringing the deeper wisdom, deeper
Yeah.
knowing. Um, and then, just being in this darker, dysregulated space without resourcing. And we talk in theory in trauma informed. You have to have resources.
Yeah.
Anything you do in life, I mean,
Yeah.
anything you do. You want to get married. You want to be in a relationship. What are your resources? You want to get the job. Who are you? What are you bringing to the table? So as a more responsible adult, especially if you're in a therapeutic setting, I mean, uh, you have to hold space, and holding space for oneself can be often challenging. So if
Yeah.
you don't have skill holding space for another individual, let alone larger group, often you're asking for trouble. And I'll share some other complications that I have hundreds of ayahuasca sufferers, I can call them.
Yeah.
They're coming to me like they're fucked up,
Yeah.
That's,
So do I. So do I. Damage control, right?
yeah, totally. Psychiatric hospitals, all of that, totally just blown their nervous system
Yeah.
off the charts. No holding, no resourcing,
Yeah.
nothing. And the reason why also, because lack of knowledge, lack of experience, you cannot compare your tribal setting, the tribe you've been in all your life. You know each other on a non-verbal, verbal level, totally in depth, and you connect with the different
Yeah.
fields, in unison. But you got total strangers, people in extremely difficult situations. You need to hold that same space. And you might say, oh, we are all one. Sure, we are. We are in the quantum field. Yeah, sure, we are. But there are certain things in the quantum field or out there that you should not visit. You should not meet.
Yeah.
It's not your space to meet.
I agree.
Same in this space here, when there are some people you can meet and you connect directly with and you feel good. And with others, it's totally the opposite.
Yeah.
In,
Yeah.
in other space, which is unpredictable space, the quantum space, it's quite, and I call it quantum because it is quantum.
So we're talking about resourcing, and we're talking about co-regulation as well, by the sounds of things. So we're talking about when you're in this space, you've flown to the other side of the world, you're in the jungle, you don't speak the language, you've got these people you don't know, there's 100 people, this close to each other, vomiting and shitting everywhere, and you're expected to surrender, right? You're expected to surrender. And when you can't or you don't, you're told, this is just your resistance, you've got to surrender to the medicine. So let's talk about resourcing, and let's talk about regulation, and let's talk about why this happens to people and why they come out, worse off quite a lot of the time. And I know you see that and I see that. And it happened to me. I had a psychotic break after ayahuasca because bloody talk about resourcing. There was nothing, not even a shred of resourcing. And it can really mess you up. So, and I don't think we hear enough about it. And I don't think we hear enough about actually why it happens, why the psyche ends up fractured, why the nervous system ends up blown out. So maybe you could explain a little bit what resourcing actually is, why it's important, and how it can relate in psychedelic space.
So in trauma work, one of the fundamental pillars is the containment, resourcing, and safety. These are the main pillars, and co-regulation, 4 pillars that you have to have. Co-regulation meaning you're regulating with your teacher or someone close to you. And that is really foundation, because as babies, we were in that space. And that's how we developed. That's how we evolved as species, all of us. Yeah. Why you see someone being more successful, more, let's say, successful in sense of more grounded, more less traumatized, and because by default we all traumatize at some level, in my experience, but less traumatized, more functional, and so on, is because they had a better start, more functionally synchronized start. So the carer, mom and dad, were more in better coherent state. They were in a more regulated state. They have great awareness, and that helps the child, baby and child really settle into that space.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you are in a hyper alert state. You are in danger. Your lack of safety is there, unpredictable. So in order for your brain to develop properly, it needs some safety. Otherwise, you are in a hyper vigilant state, and that it's even pre-verbal as well. We find that. And the main thing that really soothes the nervous system in a human being is connection with another human being. And if that connection is not safe, it's then challenges a cascade of challenges then follows later on and then follows most of us throughout the life. And so what we do in a trauma therapy, we try to repattern that. We try to connect with the human being, create that safety. Once safety is connected, then resources can start to build up. Resourcing meaning that you will feel okay with who you are right now. Resourcing meaning you can take deeper breath, you can have awareness, you can touch yourself, you can receive touch and give touch without defensiveness, and so on and so forth. So if that is not present in any setting, that any healing, so-called, it's questionable.
Yeah.
And you might actually go into very deep states through psychedelics, and they have that amazing potential to really take you into the more of a limbic state and the more of a right hemisphere state. This is where the parasympathetic, non-local quantum fields are, where you can perceive that, and it's coming home in a way.
Yeah.
For some people, that can be incredibly, powerful and supportive, but for others, it will fuck them up. It would totally dysregulate them. They will step into the place they never knew existed, and especially if the early childhood was lacking resources, even if you were resourced, but they can really take you away into very, very different state.
Yeah. So you meant, yeah, sorry, carry on.
No. So the basis of you creating safety, co-regulation, and resourcing for psychedelic trip, that you're going to be mainly in the right hemisphere there, mainly in the limbic state, mainly in the quantum field within you and around you, it's a paramount. And to me, I'm so pleased and proud of you that you're doing that, and very few people have heard to do. And that's, if we're going to work with this, and we should be working with this. We need to really learn and change that and train people to do it.
Yeah, everything you said, I just agree with so much. And you mentioned safety, and you mentioned early childhood, so that's pre-trauma for some people, right? So even if they do get that in childhood, what happens between then and the point where they're doing the journey can fuck them up as well. And safety is such a, it varies from person to person what safety means. So again, if you're bringing in these 30, 40, 100 people, even if it's 2 people, even if it's 3 people, without proper screening, without getting to know them, without having a connection there, you can't have safety in that environment, in my opinion. And, when it comes to boundaries in psychedelic space, this is where I see the most harm being done. And what you just said about feeling safe to give and receive touch. So when you're in an altered state, and somebody's touching you without your consent, I mean, that can be so traumatic. And it's happened to me. It's happened to people that come to me for integration. So maybe we can speak a little bit about boundaries in psychedelic space and why it's so important to have that kind of individuality taken into account, and why it's not just this one size fits all. Take the medicine, surrender, your trauma is going to be healed. Because when we talk about trauma, we're talking about everyone, because I believe everyone has the capacity for trauma to arise in a psychedelic state. Absolutely everyone. Some people are more prone to it than others, but I believe everyone has the capacity to go there. So what do we need to be thinking about? What do we need to be putting in place to make sure people are safe and they do feel safe?
Then I studied with Gabor Mate in 2018. Spent 1 week with him in Regent's College. And he presented work on trauma and all of this. And then he also said he's going to be leading ayahuasca, his first retreat in Costa Rica, where he's going to do pre, during, and post preparation, and also analysis and therapeutic work. And then I was like, gosh, this is it. And this guy, I mean, he's a legend. And he's talking my language, and I want to study with him. Because also, his love and compassion for other human beings, but also the sharpness and precision with his approach is phenomenal. And I had treatment with him, and it was very impressive. So, a few of us wanted to do this. Unfortunately, I never did, go there. But something on that level would be, to me, textbook, preparing people, assessing their state, having a session or so before, even online or in person, to understand depth, to understand what the story is, and then going through the process, and then post process. Then you have a reflection. Then you have deeper work with the body as well, not just talking therapy. And this is where TRE comes into, which at the time did not know much about TRE. But combination of therapies depends what suits that individual.
Yeah,
and I think that would be a really great therapeutic modality in itself that can take people into extraordinary spaces, not necessarily just as a healing space, but definitely healing, but can open particular parts of us that are still unlocked, I believe.
And the way you were talking about Gabor Mate's work, because everyone, we all love him in the trauma world, don't we? He's a pioneer, he's amazing. And you were talking about his way of working, which is that preparation, the journey, the integration. So the first thing about that is it's the same person the whole way through. So it's the same person holding the space. It's the same person taking them through. So there's already a relationship there. There's already the co-regulation. There's already the trust. There's already the safety, which is what we were talking about is missing. And I think this is a good time to bring TRE in because, I'm a bit like you. I've used myself as a guinea pig for a very, very long time. And the reason I started using TRE was because I was facilitating psychedelic journeys with psilocybin. And within the first, I'd say, hour of the journey, I noticed people would start to tremor. And it would just be like a little shoulder or something would start happening. And then they would suppress it because they'd think, God, that's weird. What am I doing? And they would suppress it. And I think there's something going on here. What is happening? So then I learned about TRE, started practicing on myself, a bit like you, went down all the substances, ketamine, MDMA, mushrooms, cannabis, tried all of them in combination with TRE. And it was absolutely wild. And I won't go into it right now, but each substance worked differently with the tremor. And so I settled on mushrooms because I have a very close connection to them. And I love that they can be used at different doses. So then, did my training with you in TRE, and now I'm weaving it all together. So I'm in the middle of a self-led trial where I'm taking people through my protocol, which is very similar to what you talked about. So it's 3 preparation sessions with me, 3 TRE sessions with me, followed by a pretty high dose psilocybin journey. And then there's 2 weeks of integration after. So it's a 6-week program where they have my full support the whole way through. And of course, the journey is done face to face. And what I'm noticing is the TRE is like the missing piece of the puzzle. There's nothing quite like it that you can bring into psychedelic space, whether it's preparation, integration, or the journey itself. There's nothing that's doing that. There's nothing that's like this extra. It's like a new language. The tremor is like, it appears to be like a language during the journey. And this is how I experienced it myself for years was, yes, you can have the insights and you can have, you can visit the quantum, you can visit aliens, you can do whatever you want up here in your mind. But the body has been really neglected in psychedelic space. It really hasn't been included in the conversation. And so when the tremor, and what I'm noticing from my trial is the tremor is spontaneously emerging in most people's journeys once they've been primed with TRE. And it's fascinating. It just shows up. And what tends to happen is they'll have a memory or they'll have an issue or something that comes up in their mind, like a normal psychedelic insight, and then the tremor takes over. That goes away. The body does all these weird things, very different to the normal tremor in the waking state. It's much more, it's not more intense, but it's very different. It moves in a different way. And then that will resolve and they'll move on to the next thing. And this process just continues pretty much for 6 hours, where it's like memory, body, memory. It's like a dance between the two. It's a conversation. And from what I've never experienced that before in any other kind of facilitation. So I'm wondering, what's your perspective on that, and how do you think TRE is working within psychedelic space?
First of all, I love, first time I hear you got the 6-week program. Fantastic. Love, great. I'm so pleased. So yeah, I'll send you some people. Because definitely people, if they want to experience, greater depths, that's what they need. And, if the people are going to spend some extra money, please spend extra money. Don't, if you want to save money, don't do anything. Just sit at home and, whatever. But, people have money to invest to fly to Peru or whatever, Ecuador, to get profoundly traumatized. Then I need to spend 6 months to get rid of the parasites and other viruses. They always came back with it,
That's
etc. So,
interesting. That's also really interesting as well, is what the body goes through.
I mean, different diet, different bacteria, fungus in there. I mean, every single person, even if they had a good experience, there were like number of other physiological, particularly colon and liver, who suffering greatly in urogenital area. So, as a naturopath, then I needed to, work so much harder to actually purge them from other stuff that they got infected with. So, okay, TRE and psychedelics. This is why science is useful here. Just and I'm going to lean onto that, just to try to give some explanation, also to myself. That's how I can understand better what is going on. And the reason why TRE is so beneficial, because it works with involuntary movement. So it works with prelimbic, limbic state, brainstem, and the cerebellum. So these unconscious parts of the brain, they govern our nervous system, they govern all our functions. Yeah. So your prefrontal cortex, it's not totally switched off. Some people, but it's not. We are still aware, but it's diminished.
Can you just describe what the prefrontal cortex does, just for
So
people who
prefrontal cortex main function is cognitive thought. So being really able to speak, to read, to understand particular concepts. That's what prefrontal cortex will do for us. With theory, you are sinking deeper into the deepest the parts of the brain, which are limbic, prelimbic state, and brainstem, and the rest of the body. So as you're already with the psychedelics in that space, because that's also a space governed by psychedelics. So the involuntary movement is totally complementary and synergetic to what is going on. However, there is a deeper wisdom within the movement, and this is what I would underline as a great support. Psychedelic might not lead you into the known space. It might take you to unknown space, while the tremor will always, or other involuntary movements, will work towards safety, towards a resolution. That's what tremor does. So it will keep the processing or repatterning of your system, because that's what I believe that is happening. As we experience different experience, we are repatterning our awareness of reality. And sometimes the body needs to embody that. Yeah. And theory helps the embodiment of that. So takes you from that quantum state and keeps embodying that. And that's why different shifts are happening. As it does this through the body, it is doing that through the limbic and brainstem and cerebellum as well. So these are my kind of observations. Then within that, you have brain networks. So you've got the visual network, you've got the limbic network, emotional network, auditory network. All of that is enhanced and changed. You've got the right hemisphere, you've got the left hemisphere, different emotions, different sensations. Insulates working here as well extensively. Somatosensory cortex as well. Basal ganglia that regulates some of these movements and so on. So it is this symphony that actually works in a slightly different way, or quite a different way, due to this particular experience. And I think that combo that you're talking about is phenomenal, because it helps to embody the quantum states that you enter into this through the psychedelics into the embodied integration of some kind.
Yeah. So you mentioned embodiment a few times, and I think that's such an important word, because we're very conditioned to just work in our minds and work with, we can think our way out of depression, and we can, it's all about being rational, isn't it? As a modern day human. And we're only just starting to, it's only just starting to get mainstream that the body actually has a lot to do with this, and the nervous system actually has a lot to do with this. And so that embodiment speaks to like the difference between a brilliant insight or coming out, like you said earlier, I feel like I've got the answers to the universe. That's really great when you're in psychedelic state, but when you shrink back into your little human form, it just goes. And that's what integration is for. So what I'm noticing with the TRE is it's this embodiment piece. It's like there's so much intrinsic healing that can happen in a psychedelic state when the body gets invited into the conversation. And what I'm noticing is that's what the tremor is doing. It's actually repatterning, as you mentioned. It's doing something. It's repatterning something. It's almost reorganizing the system while you're in psychedelic state. So not only is it useful for integration, there's so much healing that we're missing out on in psychedelic journeys because we're not inviting the body into the conversation. Kind of circle back to trauma a little bit and talk about how, because some people listening to this might not know much about how TRE works. So when we were talking about psychedelics earlier, we're talking about trauma therapy, right? A lot of the time it's working with trauma. So the way that that's happening is generally, a memory comes up, maybe you can revisit your inner child, or you can do some reconciliation. And that's generally how we're working with psychedelics. And there's, of course, all the other stuff that you can't really explain that happens as well. But again, there feels like there's a piece of the puzzle missing, which is how trauma affects the body and the system. And in particular, things like the fascia system. So I wonder if you could also maybe weave that in a little bit of what's physically happening with the TRE as well, and what might be being worked out in psychedelic space.
TRE, which stands for tension trauma release exercise, that triggers or induces these neurogenic tremors. Tremor that all of us felt that when you get a little bit scared or excited, your hands might go, your lips might go, your throat, your knees, all of that. That's already innate mechanism. That helps to regulate this excitement that our sympathetic nervous system in particular triggers. But TRE within a greater context, it's the huge range of different movements. So all involuntary movements, spontaneous movements are part of that experience, because once the vagus nerve triggers that response of downregulation of sympathetic excitement, you might have your shoulder shifting, you might have a pulsation happening, contractions, expansion, shivering, the range of movement that you would experience through TRE. And if we understand that within us are anywhere from 50 to 100 trillion cells, all of these cells are pulsating. They are contracting and expanding. So they are part of this involuntary movement. When you tremor, you connect with the entire body. And there are different kinds of tremors. Okay? When you connect with the whole body, how you connect it through, it's mainly the fascial or myofascial system, which is this inner web that we have. There are different forms of fascia and so on. But just to simplify it, it's the inner cosmic web of our inner universe that connects all organs, all structures in the body. Okay, it connects them, it divides them, and unites them as well. So it has this multiple function. Also, the fascia is quantum matter as well. It's not just Newtonian mechanical. I teach specialized workshops on fascia, and the fluid within the fascia, it's actually non-Newtonian fluid. Non-Newtonian means it doesn't abide by the earthly laws as such.
I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
And I can show you the videos of that, how you can teach and you can experience that. So you there are particular interstitium within the fascia or fluid. That's if you hit it, it will feel like you're hitting the wall.
Wow.
Yeah, and that also protects us. But if you gently touch it, it's just fluid. Your hands go through it. As you move, as you tremor, as you have this experience, your whole system is engaged. Fascia is sending messages in and out. Also, what is happening, fascia has these abilities to be in 5-dimensional states, not just the 4-dimensional. It means that, for example, if the structure of fascia is in this form, as we move, parts of the fascia can rip, can separate, and then repair in a different space. And there are videos on that from Professor Gimberto and other legends in the fascia field. And that's unusual thing that immediately within seconds or microseconds, there is a reorganization and repatterning of your inner tissue. Extraordinary. That transmits the information. How your fascia changes, your movement changes. Your endocrine state, which means your hormonal state changes, your nervous state changes, your physiological, your emotional state changes, everything changes. So what happens in traumatic events, either physically you're hit, so there is an injury to a particular part of my shoulder is broken, for example. Yeah, I had a broken shoulder. So part of the fascia and the tissue has particular fulcrum, we call it, fulcrum or knot, let's say in simple terms. That it's as a protective mechanism really helped to heal, but the scar and let's say this knot often stays in the system, and then my shoulder has a limitation of movement or expression and so on. Equally, if I've been violated in some way, emotionally, sexually, whichever way, so I don't necessarily have a physical injury, fascia will hold the charge of this emotional trauma. And often you see this in postures as we start to hunch and be in overly protective state, or you have people who are overly confident, and you can see the postures. This is all defense mechanism. People express differently. People's faces are symmetrical, the shoulders different. All of that is holding the range of expression: physical, emotional, psychological expression. And what happens that trauma stays in our system and is expressed. If you know what to look for, you see that. I mean, in July, I'm teaching again the body reading in theory, and, just to teach people the body is open book if you know what to look for. And it's incredibly useful to see that and know that. And then it helps with your communication and the therapeutic work. So as you work with TRE, you start to reorganize and repattern the fascial structures. Some of the traumas leave the body. The repatterning takes place internally and then goes towards the outside of towards the periphery of the body. And the similar thing happens with psychedelics. This is what they found. The different parts of the brain, they expand. The locked nervous system or the synaptic pruning, it's enhanced manifold. So you don't need to do the same repetition, 400 times to change the pattern. You can actually potentially do some of the neurological psychedelic journey combined with theory or some other form of movement or integration. And you can have incredibly beneficial therapeutic modality going.
The way you talk about fascia and the inner cosmic web, I absolutely love that. I might have to steal that one from you because it's very psychedelic. And also, you said the body's an open book, and it sounds like the fascia is what holds the stories. And you, because of your experience and your skills, you can read those stories. And what I love about I'm hesitant to call it TRE because it's not necessarily the structure that we know as TRE. But what I'm doing here is priming the body with TRE so that it has that chain open and it understands and it can go into spontaneous involuntary movement if that's what's correct for the person. It's not always correct for the person, but 99% of times that I've observed, it is happening, and it's different for everybody. So what's fascinating to me about it is that the body clearly knows how to do this. This is not something that it's not like we're manipulating anything here. All we're doing is we're triggering something that's clearly innate. And when you see it coming up in psychedelics, it's unbelievably fascinating because it's so weird and it's so strange looking, but it's so organic looking, and it's so kind of like, oh, of course this is what the body's doing. Of course this is what it's doing. And when I first did my big experiment with TRE and psychedelics, I have EDS, so I have a lot of connective tissue pain, a lot of issues with my fascia, issues with my tissues, and I had such bad hip pain at this point. This was about 6 years ago, that I couldn't really walk up a flight of stairs. It was like every single step was excruciating. So I went to Spain and I went to do this big high dose psychedelic journey, and I said, okay, my intention is I'm going to understand how TRE interfaces with mushrooms. That was what I wanted to know. And I'm not kidding you, for 7 hours, I just tremored like you've never seen before, mostly from my the lower half of my body, but I mean, it went everywhere. And I was shown, this sounds wacky to some people, but I was shown almost this blueprint of the body. And it was like a car engine. It was like seeing a car, and it was like, this is how the body works. Nobody has turned the key in the engine. And it was showing me, like, initiating this tremor was like turning the key in the engine. It was like everything was firing up. Everything was the fuel was starting to burn off. Everything that was stuck inside the engine or stuck inside the car. I know nothing about cars. It was like all the gunk was being cleared out. Everything was just being burned off. And this went on for hours and hours and hours. And the next day, the pain was gone, completely gone. No more pain. And it hasn't come back since. I mean, I have the odd niggle, but nothing like that. And I've seen this kind of spontaneous healing with another client of mine, and the body was just clearly just desperate to resolve this pattern, but it just didn't have the right instructions up until that point. And again, we weren't forcing anything. It's not even like when you're doing a conscious TRE session in this, normal waking state. It's very different. The body's doing it all by itself. You don't need to do anything. You just really need to get out of the way and just say, okay, body, take over, because the body knows, right? The body knows how to do this. And that's what I find fascinating.
That was the main point about the pain. It's not some miraculous thing. It sounds miraculous, but what you gave chance for your body to purify, detoxify from old patterns, and you actually changed you were pruning the synaptic connections in part of the limbic system and sensory-motor cortex that actually sends the information, oh, there is a danger there. She had an injury there, you need to send the nociceptive nerve pain information. So, pain, 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 she can't do it. And with psychedelics, you clear that. With TRE, you actually embody the synaptic pruning, goes into the body and so on. And you have that experience or that spontaneous healing. So through my scientific mind, this actually is quite a clear pattern.
And I think what's wonderful about you is, it's that bridge of the scientific and the spiritual, because we're talking about the same bloody thing. But I think what's often missing is context, because yes, you can have a big spiritual experience and there can be a lot of science to support what's happening. And I just really believe in bridging the two. And that's where we can have the deepest experiences. So what do you think about all of that?
Totally. I studied spirituality, all forms for many years, but I also like science. I'm doing functional neuroanatomy now with the Melillo. I mean, I'm loving that, understanding networks and brain a lot more. And I'm realizing how little people know, how professionals, top professionals, how little they know. And in this field, it is paramount because we're working with these structures. And it is spiritual. How can it not be spiritual? All of this. Consciousness that streams through us. How do you breathe? How do you actually hear me now? How we are connected now? It's extraordinary. It is this consciousness that we need to have more respect for and more gratitude as well. Because people just complain about problems or my traumas. Sure, I mean, I'm sorry that this happened, but to myself, maybe I shared with you some of my traumatic. I'm not sorry any longer at all. I'm actually grateful. It is who I am. Without these stories and these experiences, I wouldn't be who I am. And by transforming them, this is the job. Not just staying in the victimhood that I stayed for years and so on, but working on it, transforming that gives you the depth. That then you can say, "Oh, I'm bridging the matter with the spirit." Then, otherwise, you either fuck off into the spiritual escapism somewhere because it's being here is too fucking difficult, or you just become so focused on the kind of matter, on the cognitive part, on money, on all of this, and you forget, you exclude the rest of the reality. And I think we need to it's all of that within us. I mean, the potential is phenomenal, but also the beauty and the darkness that is within, all of that. It's amazing anyway. So and I think psychedelics really helps us to, with guidance and with kind of a deeper wisdom and understanding, that helps us really, we should be flowering more, all of us, and takes us from established point of view. Everything needs to be, what do they call this, evidence based, like, meaning what? Evidence based on whose evidence? Yeah, but whose evidence though? Which machine was, can you explain to me what consciousness is? Let me see any evidence-based scientist there. Explain to me what consciousness is. And I'm speaking with extreme confidence because I had the communication with one of the smartest men on the planet, physicist, who actually was working with artificial intelligence and consciousness. He was trying to bring consciousness into artificial intelligence. It's all nonsense. It's impossible. How do you, how do you experience life internally? How do you experience your emotions that happen internally? Yeah, you need to know that every emotion has at least 1,400 biochemical reactions. So you're basically flooding. There are rivers going through you as you experience happiness, sadness, depression, all of that. You're stuck in any of these, your whole system is getting blocked. It is kind of trauma by default. So dynamic movement in life, it's the key to all of that. Experience all broad range of emotions. But if you go to understanding how each cell function, it's through the electric current and electromagnetic field that they form experiences. But how do they form experiences? How does your emotional experience transform, or how does electric current transform into emotional experiences? Even better. No one knows that. And we want to go on the fucking Mars, and we don't know that the basic elements of what it means to be a being, not just human being, but being on this plane. We don't know how electric current and electromagnetic field changes into emotion. How that what's the switch there? The smartest people on the planet don't know that, but you do know that because you experience that when you love something. How much do you love? How can you? What's the evidence-based love measurement there? Can you explain that? Can anyone explain that to me? I mean, I studied that for decades. No one could explain that. How can love be measured? Depth of love for my child, for my parent, for my wife, for different kinds of love, different intensities. That's unfathomable stuff. Where is that evidence-based stuff? So trust yourself more. Sit in that consciousness. We are made out of that stuff. Without that extraordinary consciousness, which is like superior intelligence than anything we can potentially understand with the this is what also surrender, truly surrender, when you use the cognitive mind, but it's the switch off time. Just let me drop into deeper intelligence. And to me, that's true healing then, and without dissociating, but fully understanding responsibly surrounding to the deeper intelligence. That to me it makes sense why we're here, how we function.
Yeah, there's so much mystery, and it's so interesting because psychedelics can be used. I mean, they're very much guided by intention, right? So a lot of the time, the intention, even if it's a subconscious intention, is to escape. It's to go into the woo-woo and the aliens. And I'm not saying that's bad or wrong, but what I'm saying is, if you're trying to heal trauma, your intention needs to be a bit more grounded in reality. It needs to be, and it can be used to explore all of the things you're talking about. And at the same time, you can learn more about this, how the human system works, how the human body exists and lives and breathes. And there's so much reverence there. There's so much fascination there. And it's a bit like you said about, like, we're going to space to explore Mars. Psychedelics is a little bit like that. We're going out to see the entities and to see all this stuff without actually, it's almost like this isn't enough. It's like, well, this isn't enough. I need to find something more interesting, more fascinating, the next big thing, the next big, the big hit. But actually, this is extraordinary, and we still haven't fully explored that.
Exactly. And we're falling into that established mode of conditioning.
Yeah.
Like, just look elsewhere, step outside of yourself, someone else know better.
Yeah.
Don't connect with your own nature. You're not good enough. The nature around us, that's all, not really that important. The machines, and anyway, all of this stuff. And as a matter of fact, unconsciously plugging into that.
If I were to come back to my intention for doing this work, it's to heal humanity and bring balance back to humanity. It's really as simple as that, because I think we've really lost our balance. So, I think that needs to involve the body, that needs to involve the nervous system. We need to be staying safe. We need to be thinking in trauma-informed ways. And I think you've just added so much richness and nuance and really in-depth science to this conversation as well. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. And just any closing thoughts or anything that you'd like to end on about how we can do this better, how we can do this more safely, how we can weave all of this together.
I think we're doing it, some of us. So just kind of integrating and connecting with each other, supporting each other. That's important. And these days, I'm really, really full of gratitude, because my own deeper connection with myself and with my own nature around me, and it's not all easy. I had a really difficult, family, extreme situations, but thanks to some of this work, that includes theory, that includes science, that includes psychedelics, that includes everything I went through. It's all valuable. So people need to appreciate everything they experienced in life, really from very beginning. And there are some difficult things they experience. These things are important, but also great things, and having gratitude for all of that. And maybe some people won't be in the place to hear that, to have gratitude for particular illness or particular pain or etc. But coming from personal experience and working with thousands of people, it's actually there that the depth is, and the gratitude. And from there is new opening. That fulcrum, that's not. It's not there against us. It's part of the defense mechanism, but also it's the key through which you enter into really extraordinary spaces that you.
And even if people aren't in the place to hear that, and I know what it's like not to be in a place where you can hear that. It's not everybody's truth, but I think it might give people hope to know that that's possible. Even if they're not there now, even if they don't believe that's possible, that you've worked with thousands of people, I know you've been through your own really difficult trauma, so that it is possible to heal. It really is. And if you haven't got there yet, you maybe just haven't had the right support and the right tools, because you also need that. This is a privilege. What we know is a privilege. The work we get to do is a privilege. Not everybody has access to that. And that's why we're here, to try and make this more accessible and to try and bring practices like TRE that are so simple, and you can then take it away and do it yourself. We're not gatekeeping this stuff either. So I think it's wonderful just to spread this awareness and this knowledge and give people hope and give people the information.
Yeah. Exactly. Thank you. And what you just said, 20 years ago, I could not imagine I would be saying that. And it was a long journey, and it still is. I'm not saying everything is fixed in my life. As a matter of fact, I don't want everything fixed either. Why?
No, that's boring.
Oh, we make mistakes, so what? It's fucking what? Of course I'm
And
going to
it's
be
supposed to be messy, everyone. It's supposed to be messy. Healing doesn't look like floating around in white robes, preaching love and light and saying everything's amazing. That is bullshit. It's just pure escapism. The reality of healing is you stay the same. Things get a bit easier, and all of that trauma kind of shrinks in the rearview mirror a little bit. The volume gets turned down one little bit at a time. It's not usually a big dramatic once, one big mushroom ceremony, one big ayahuasca ceremony. It's not usually like that. And I think that's also important to say, is this is a process. This is a lifelong thing. It's not an event, trauma healing is not an event.
Because we are too complex, really. That would undermine the complexity of who we are and this consciousness that streams through us. Oh, this skill will fix it. This workshop will fix it. Like, yeah, it might fix part of the bigger picture, but there's so much more. And that's really a beautiful thing when you realize that, and we are guided. We are definitely guided by deeper intelligence within us. We need to rely more on that, and I think it's a safe space no matter what happens. It's a great Anthony Hopkins. I love him saying, don't fool yourself. No one's leaving this place alive. So it's just, I love that. It just always brings a smile on my face. And here we are. So while we're here, honestly, this streaming consciousness and beauty and pain are here for us to experience. And if you don't know what to do, there are people who can help you.
Yeah.
We were often helpless and lost and confused. It's normal, for God's sake, And just having someone to say, look, I need help. I don't know what the fuck to do, And that needs to start to be accepted in our society. It's not accepted by default, but we need to change that shift because it's nonsense anyway. No one knows what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
No one. So just accepting more and relaxing into this deeper intelligence and communicating, connecting with others, and life at large. It's a great message.
Yeah. It all comes back to the most simple things, doesn't it? Connection, gratitude, love. Yeah. After that 1 hour, 17 minute, 35-second conversation, that's what we come back to.
Exactly.
So, I think that's a good place to end the conversation. So I just want to say thank you so much. I'm going to have to watch this back, take more notes. It's been fascinating. And just, I think you're such a special person, the way you do straddle these two worlds, and you're so grounded, and you just see through all the bullshit. And I think practitioners like that are invaluable. So thank you for everything that you do and for teaching me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I'm so pleased with what you're doing. Great.
Thank you.